NFL guy it was, but who really liked the under on us. And I think the under was 7.5 this year. And we're like, well, that's impossible.
It seems impossible.
It's impossible for that to happen. I will say that there was one of the things that I always look forward to, in terms of the training camp part of it, is when you get that practice with another team. And while before we got into camp, there was a sense of, hey, let's go win the Super Bowl. There were some cracks in the offensive approach in that camp against Minnesota. We just weren't as crisp.
Totally.
And that second day especially, their defense really made it difficult for us to do anything offensively. And we talked in camp about, boy, something's not right. Like, it feels like we're constantly under pressure, under duress. Deshaun constantly under pressure, under duress. So there was something in those days when Minnesota was here that went, okay, if we get to where we thought we could get, it's not going to happen in September.
Yes, but it would turn out that Minnesota is one of the best sack-generating teams in the league. You certainly didn't come out of those joint practices. Now, I know Diana Rossini went on to say that she thought we were going to be a big disappointment after those practices, and boy, was she correct. But I don't think you came out of those practices and said, that's a team that's going to go 14-3, the Vikings.
No.
And we're going to go 3-14.
It wasn't that I thought that all of a sudden it meant we were going to go 3-14. It was just, this isn't quite as well-oiled as I'd hoped it would be at that
offensively.
point.
But defensively,
Defensively, they were legit.
Dominant.
But we also, the other thing there was we had no indication that Minnesota would be what they ended up being.
That's what I mean.
Because McCarthy got hurt that day on that Monday, and so they pivot to Darnold full-time right away, and so away they go. So there were a lot of factors to that, but I just remember thinking that's not as crisp as we should be for a team that we thought was going to be, before all of it started, had hoped would be like a Super Bowl contender, AFC North contender.
There was like one decent red zone period, and then
much.
Other than that, it felt like a jailbreak to the quarterback. And, yeah, that was a little eye-opening, but it still didn't feel like
not 3-14.
Not this. No. Not this. I mean, we were the statistic. We didn't score 20 points in our first 7 games, and that hadn't. I mean, we were doing things on a historically futile level.
Yes.
Historically, like out of 1,200 teams, we were 1,190.
Yeah, and
like,
it was
historically bad.
It was an offensive issue from the beginning. It was, I think, when you look back on this, because of the uncertainty around Deshaun Watson's future, and just from the standpoint of 2 Achilles surgeries in a little more than a month, that's I think what this will look back on is boy, that is the third year of Deshaun Watson, the second year with a catastrophic injury that ends the season, and a year ago that injury happened, and you were able to find a guy literally on the couch who resuscitated a season, and this season we didn't have that in us.
No, we did not have that in us, unfortunately, and we had, some signs of life from Jameis, but, once we got the first half of the season, we were futile, but we didn't really turn the ball over. We had self-inflicted wounds in the form of penalties, pre-snap penalties, and again, sloppy play and ineffective play, and then you get to the Jameis portion of the season, and then DTR, and then even into Bailey Zappi, and with Jameis, you had some explosive games, but then turnovers just derailed you.
Yeah.
From the time that Jameis became the starting quarterback, I think the only game in which we did not have 2 or more giveaways was down in New Orleans, and somehow we only scored 14 points and had like 450 yards of offense, something stupefying. But other than that, it was just every week 2, and for a stretch there, it was 3 every week, giveaways.
Yep.
And you can't win that way.
No. There were some bright spots. Miles, certainly Denzel Ward was exemplary. Sure. 2 cornerstone guys. I thought second half of the year our offensive line came along, and then obviously Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, Jeudy goes to his first Pro Bowl, career high over 1,000 yards this season, career high in catches. That's the Browns franchise record for most catches in a single season. His top 5, I think, or top 6 in yards in a single season from Jerry Jeudy. He was great. Miles becomes the first player ever with 14 or more sacks in 4 straight seasons. Miles becomes the youngest player ever to, or because the first player ever to get to 100 career sacks for the 29th birthday, does it literally a week before his 29th birthday, the last chance he had. Jeudy, by the way, was number 1 in receptions in a single season by a Brown, number 5 in receiving yards in a single season by a Cleveland Brown, trailing only Josh Gordon, Braylon Edwards, Amari Cooper, and Webster Slaughter in 1989. Denzel played at an all-pro level, but it's weird. He had 19 passes defense, it felt like, with 6-7 games to go.
I was gonna say week 12 it felt like.
Yeah, and then wasn't able to get another one. Still a snub. I thought that he absolutely should have been a first-team All-Pro this season. Definitely got a little bit of a snub there. But led the NFL in passes defensed. Got the couple of picks. He's the only corner since he's entered the league in 2018 to have 7 straight seasons with 10 passes defensed and 2 picks in each of the first 7 seasons. He was great. The line got better. Corey Bojorquez was a bright spot, I thought, for this team this season. Which you don't necessarily want your punter to be a bright spot. You saw young guys develop like Isaiah McGuire. You saw Alex Wright prior to his injury. You saw Mike Hall prior to his injury. And it sounds like good news. He'll be ready to go for next year. You saw Mahmoud Diabate step up. You saw Devin Bush, the former first-rounder, really kind of rejuvenate his career here. Ronnie Hickman continues to play well on the back end. Grant Delpit continues to look like one of the better safeties in the National Football League. You had some step backs from certain people. MJ Emerson in the beginning to middle of the season definitely took a step back, but finished strong, which was encouraging. And it's, even as we talk about it right now, it still seems crazy, 3 of 14. I mean, we won a lot of games last year off the foot of Dustin Hopkins. This year he was not good. I think 18 of 27 on field goals. It's 66%. He was 90% last year. Didn't miss from over 50. We unfortunately got beat by quite a bit in a great many games this year. And that's the other thing that's so strange about it. You lose to the Cowboys by 16. You lose to the Giants only by 6. You lose to the Raiders by 4. You lose to the Commanders by 21. Lose to the Eagles by 4. Lose to the Bengals by 7. So that was the beginning part of the season, and that's the end of Deshaun Watson. So you actually were more competitive there than it turns out you ended up being, because then you lose to the Chargers by 17, the Saints by 21, the Broncos by 9, Steelers by 13, Bengals by 18, Dolphins by 17, Ravens by 25. I mean, when you do those numbers,
9 games of 9 points or more margin,
and 8 of significant double-digit, 2 scores.
Yeah, you also, the other thing that we had this year was, you have the return of Nick Chubb and then the injury to Nick Chubb, and then you still have this uncertainty around JOK. Like, you go back before Nick's initial injury 2 years ago and you say, well, those are 2 pillar franchise cornerstones. And now, you hope that Nick comes back in some capacity, but it's a second straight season. And JOK, there's still wild uncertainty. So there was a lot to this season. And then, of course, there was the loss of Jim. And that was such a huge part of this. The loss of Jim, the announcement before the season had begun that he was going to step away to spend time with his family, the incredible emotion that happened in the Baltimore game, all of those things. But that was something that adds to this in what was a crazily just surreal season across all levels. There was also this infinite sadness of The Voice.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's still, when you really allow yourself to dive into it and think about it, is incredibly sad how quickly that went. I mean, that was at the Greenbrier this year that Gibbe and I got to live with Jim for 9 days. Yep. And we knew that, that the cancer had returned, but we certainly did not know that this was the outcome, that it was going to be middle of the season. The sadness of that, the emotion of that, the outpouring of emotion from our fans, from even our players, from this organization, that culminated in what can only be described as a spiritual, magical day, beating the Ravens.
Yep.
Hamilton dropping the interception. I think we had a doink in the game as well, or a field goal that blew back.
Kyle Hamilton dropped the easiest interception he's had in
3
his
different
entire
times.
life. Yeah, 3 times. I mean, it would, as a 4-year-old, he would have made that pick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that had that very special emotional moment. But yeah, this has been a season of great loss, and certainly none greater than that of Jim Donovan, which still to this day is, something that we all think about all the time. And I think about it every time I'm in the booth, and talk with Megan on game days and even not on game days, throughout the season and the year. And yeah, it was a very, very sad season in a great many ways, And ironically, I thought that was I call it the Jim Donovan game. The Jim game of the Ravens is one of the most memorable and special games I've ever called or been a part of. You had the Snow Globe win over the Steelers on Thursday night, which was kind of a magical, surreal game. And so you had these two wins that were emotional and powerful, and obviously Jim won more emotional, more powerful in the midst of a season of just baffling disappointment.
For a bunch of reasons, this was one of those years where you just quite honestly needed it to end. Right? I mean, just got to the end. It was like, okay, another week. Like, let's get through it. And one of the things that we're going to talk about over the course of the next couple of hours is this notion of, well, you did get a lifeboat through all of this, and that lifeboat is the form of the number 2 pick in the draft. So as we continue to look back, we will also be looking forward a little bit over the course of this season review show. Today's opening segment is brought to you by University Hospitals, official healthcare partner of your Cleveland Browns. Play-by-play voice of your Cleveland Browns, Andrew Siciliano, is going to join us coming up next. You're listening to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland. Boost your game day this season with the Bally Bet Sportsbook app. Place your first bet at $25 or more. You get $150 back in bonus bets. Bally Bet, official sports betting partner of your Cleveland Browns. Time to head out on the Twisted Tea hotline, brought to you by Twisted Tea Hard Iced Tea, official sponsor of your Cleveland Browns. Keep it Twisted Cleveland. He is the play-by-play voice of your Cleveland Browns. He's a great close friend. Andrew Siciliano joining us. Buddy, thank you so much for taking the time on the season review show. You had a front row seat for a lot of this. As we, in order to improve upon this, we have to first look back and see where were the mistakes. How do we make them right? When did you first get the sense that maybe this season wasn't going to end the way that we all thought it was going to?
That's a great question, Bo. Hi, guys. Great first 20 minutes. Long-time listener, first-time caller. And, I'm with you on everything you just said about Jim, because it was something I thought about, not to take it backwards and ignore the question, but it was something I thought about, honestly, every day as well, to be honest with you. And that Ravens game, I think about that Ravens game a lot, actually, not just because it was one of only 3 wins all year, but because it was something, I know, Nathan, that we just wanted to get right. I'm speaking for myself. Mm-hmm. I know your emotions were far different, having worked with Jim every week and every day. I just wanted to get it right. And I thought that, Bo, I'm going to reverse engineer your question, could have been a turning point to take it back in the other direction, right? And it wasn't, and that is one that I replay in my mind a lot. Like, what if we had, ridden that in the opposite direction and made a run and turned things around and replay 2023, but with Jameis, and that's what I think of. But it didn't happen, and it didn't happen. When did I think it was going downhill? Honestly, when Deshaun got hurt, and not to go replay everything, they went into the quarterback decision, the quarterback journey with his team, with him over the last couple of years. But that's when you just kind of knew, like, all right, like, this season's kind of going right into the dump. I never thought it would be 3-14, but things run downhill, and sometimes you can't turn momentum around. And like you just said, Nathan, Denzel didn't have a pass defense over the last couple of weeks. Miles had his game against the Dolphins, but why you'd think he'd have more than 14 sacks. Not that they played poorly, they didn't, but sometimes it just runs downhill, and you got to get through the season.
Yeah, it was just, as I said, unfathomable. Honestly, that's really the word that I have for the way that this season played out. And the one good thing, obviously, we talked about is that you do get the number 2 pick out of it, Andrew. So kind of as you look at it and kind of look at what we've done, which is a little bit of a yo-yo, right? You had a good 2020, not so great 2021, 2022. You take the big swing, but you end up getting a bigger suspension than you expected. You get 11 games, I think, of Jacoby Brissett, then 6 of Deshaun. 23 starts off high expectations. Deshaun's hurt, in and out, blah, blah, blah. We get to some magical wins that you certainly were in the booth for. You think about the Niners game. You think about the Indianapolis Colts game right after that. And then in comes Flacco, and you have that magical run. You go to the playoffs, and then it really goes back down again. How do we get this thing regulated to where we've got a baseline, and now we're just trying to go up from that every single year?
I would tell fans, and there were 18 teams. Browns aren't just one of them that sat on their couch this past weekend. But I would tell fans, look at the Broncos, look at the Commanders. You find the right guy at quarterback. This is easy to flip. It's easier to flip when you have a base and you have talent that has already been to the playoffs, when your roster has had that success, when you are not at a dearth of talent. And you have those foundational pieces. You just have to find that guy, and that is by far the most important thing that this organization has to do in the offseason. You guys know that. I don't know that quarterback is there at 2. If Deion Sanders wants to coach the Cowboys and they want the 2nd overall pick to draft Shador, and the want to drop back to 12, and they want to take Dak Prescott and the Cowboys could pay all of Dak's $132 million that's due the next 3 years. Sure, maybe that's the answer, but I think that's far-fetched. They got to find that guy, and I don't think anyone saw Sam Darnold coming. I'm not suggesting Daniel Jones is that guy, but you have to go far and wide and consider every possible option, including those that are seemingly inconceivable. And I don't know what those are. Digging good quarterbacks, starting quarterbacks off other teams' rosters. The financial implications, obviously, are hard to manage. But if you find that guy, I know this team can win. Because you talk about the defensive line, like, hey, Isaiah McGuire played well. Hey, Alex Wright played well. You forget Alex Wright missed 2 months of the season, and he was really turning a corner. JOK is a big question mark. But you put those guys all back on the field, and if they're healthy, this team can win.
Do you think that this is an off season in which, and we've all said it, look, the quarterback is the most important thing in this sport, and until you get that right when you're in a division with Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson, until you get that right and you're in a conference with Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes, all of whom are still playing, that this offseason, do you need to add 3 new quarterbacks? Do you need to go for a proven veteran? Do you need to get a Daniel Jones type who's in the Sam Darnold or even Baker mold of a high pick who's had flashes of success in the past, but right now is somebody without a home? And then also a rookie, whether that be early or whether that be in the second round, third round, whatever it is. Are you thinking of a 3 new quarterback room?
I think you need at least 2. I think you need a bridge plus. I think you need a guy that is, you tell in March when you sign him, if you sign one at the start of the new league year on the 12th of March, that you are going to be our starter. And, oh, by the way, we may draft somebody, and we may draft somebody at 2. You have to be open and honest. Let's do the Kirk Cousins thought experiment. If it's him, he's not doing what he did in Atlanta last year without an open and honest conversation. Right, he's not getting surprised when they draft a quarterback at 2 or trade down. You have to go, hey, buddy, if you want to come play here, and look, it's outdoors, it's going to get cold. We might have another snow globe game or 2. If you want this, we want you, and we also will draft a guy. So you're going to have to go through that again. If this is the place you want to be, let's go do it. If it isn't him, it's going to be somebody else. But you have to go find a guy in March who could be your day 1 starter. I firmly believe that, because you can't just go into the draft. Although with the second pick, you have more options, just assuming that you're going to get the guy that you have circled as the guy that you think can turn the franchise around, because you're 2, you're not 1. And Tennessee could always stun you, and somebody could offer them a Herschel Walker deal, an RG3 deal, and someone can go up to 1 and take the guy that you want. The draft is a highly unpredictable thing. But when I had Andrew Berry on the podcast last week, I said to him point blank, hey, the thought for most people is go sign a guy in March and draft a guy, and those are your 2 guys with whom you remake your quarterback room. Is that your thinking? And understandably, he didn't want to say yes. He said we got a lot of options. Look, you're not going to – I know sometimes people are frustrated with evasive answers from general managers, but they're not going to go, yes, we're signing a starter on March 12th, and we fully intend to draft a quarterback at 2. The time between now and the start of the draft is, we used to call in the NFL Network newsroom, like, lying season. Like, if GMs are talking, they're lying. I'm not saying Andrew was lying. You guys know that. But as we get closer and closer to the draft, there's only so much guys want to say. They're all playing poker, right? Everyone's talking. No one wants to truly play their hand. You could have a guy like Chris Ballard, who's going into his 9th season, who every single year gets on the podium and pounds his chest and pounds his table and gets close to tears and say it's all my fault. But they haven't found their quarterback either.
I think the question for Andrew Berry, and the one that I think if he were hooked up to a lie detector he would answer with the resounding yes, is if you were to phrase the question, by the time this offseason is over, will you have the answer to quarterback or the pursuit of a quarterback at the Cleveland Browns? I think the answer to that has to be a resounding yes. I don't think you can go through
Yes,
this
I
off
agree.
season waiting for next off season and next year's draft. I think they have to have, okay, this is our path at quarterback for the next 3 to 5 and hopefully 5 to 10. That has to be sorted out this summer. That path has to be mapped.
I totally agree with you, Bo. I would also offer this. This is not a great quarterback class. Now, we've seen guys come out of nowhere and all of a sudden become franchise changers, right? But if this organization doesn't think that either of the top 2 guys in this draft truly are generational, transformational talents, although I think we overuse generational, then what? Then you have to go find a bridge and wait until next year. Mike Tomlin was just on the podium. And he said he doesn't want to commit to any of the guys in the room, but, yes, he could bring either of them back, meaning Russell or Justin Fields. And someone said, hey, don't you guys kind of feel like you're in no man's land? You're good enough to make the playoffs, but not bad enough to be the top of the draft and get a quarterback. And he said, I don't think that's the case. I don't buy that. Lamar Jackson was the 32nd pick in the draft, and what's his name? Jalen Hurts was picked in the 2nd round. Now, there aren't many second-round quarterbacks these days. Jalen Hurts is an outlier that actually do anything. Most of the quarterbacks who you think have a chance get pushed up into the 1st round. Like the idea, we're going to get a guy in the 2nd or 3rd round, like, hi, Desmond Ridder line 1. It just doesn't happen that often. Now, Dak Prescott was that guy. He's the outlier. But there just aren't many of those guys. Kirk Cousins was one, but that was a decade
Long time ago.
plus. Yeah, so, I mean, we do have to keep our mind open to the possibility that neither of these guys, if we call them Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders as the top 2 guys, are game changers. They might be, but, I mean, Cam Ward started at Incarnate Word, and before that he was at high school in Houston where they were throwing it 20 times a season.
Yeah, there's also, the pushback I would have for that is I don't know if anybody going into last year's draft thought Bo Nix would be quarterback in a playoff team. And when we were at the Combine, you were there with us, the gap between
You're totally right.
The gap between Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels was the Grand Canyon. There wasn't anybody over there who was like, oh, yeah, this is close. Like, Jaden might go number 1. There was none of that. It was Caleb and then huge gap. So, yeah, there's no certainty in this. The one thing that is a certainty, if you look at the NFL playoffs and the 8 teams that are left, the only 2nd-round pick in the bunch is Jalen Hurts. Everybody else was a 1. 1st round.
Right.
And you got 2 of them were 1 overall. 2 of them were number 2 overall. What was Mahomes, 10th? 10th.
Yeah.
Allen was what? 6th? I think, somewhere in there, 5th, 7th.
Yep.
And then Lamar at the end of the 1st. So, like, there's guys, and you got to find them.
Yeah, you look at
I'm with you, and
Yeah.
If you're going to ask the question, do you have to take one? My opinion, yes. But, I know there have been organizations over the years that go, all right, we take this guy in the top 5, we have to take him. But go, I'm not really sure. It happens.
Use
Kinda
your
to
line,
that
'cause
point,
I think
though.
your line is the right one on this.
Well, all I was saying is, and I don't care if you pick him at 2 or not, but the fact that we're picking 2nd in this draft, and I'm not saying I have the answer or how to connect the dots to that, but we shouldn't be picking here ever again unless it's with somebody else's pick. This pick and being where we are, this asset has to turn into that quarterback. And not say that quarterback then has the success, but it has to turn into a legitimate swing at the future quarterback and franchise quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. I
totally agree with you. I totally agree.
And
go back to look at the Bears, though, a couple of years ago. They turned a top 5 pick into number 1 by trading out one year and then ending up with Carolina's number 1.
Because they had Fields, who they thought was their guy, right? They had Fields. Yeah. We unfortunately, we don't have a Fields now. We could have Justin Fields. That's another story for another day. But that's just my sense of it. And here's the other thing. It's one thing, I think, if you have an organization where you are, let's say you're the Patriots, or you are led by, just not even the Patriots because they have Vrabel, but you're led by a defensive coach.
Yeah.
That is the leader of your organization, all of that.
Seattle.
We're led by a 2-time coach of the year for what he does as a play caller and an offensive designer. we're hiring a brand new offensive coordinator, which very well could be Tommy Rees or Clint Kubiak would be my guess of the top two candidates. Their job, in essence, is to get the most out of whatever talent you think exists at that position. And so there has to be a scenario in which there is somebody in this draft that will be available at pick number 2 that the Browns have to feel like Kevin Stefanski and Tommy Rees or Clint Kubiak or whomever the OC ends up being can get this guy to be that guy. Because if they can't, and I know Mo Pedman's cousin has raised a similar type of thought, that has questions to it. Right? Like, the whole goal in this league is to get the best out of the quarterback, because if you don't have that, to your point, we're talking about where these guys were drafted and the way that the quarterbacks are playing, that of the teams that are left, with the exception of maybe C.J. Stroud, has not been lights out all year. But in the AFC, Mahomes over the second half has been lights out. And by the way, give him plenty of pass. They weren't losing either.
No.
And anytime he needed to make a drive, he did. And then Allen and Lamar are playing like the best quarterbacks in the league. On the other side, you got Jared Goff left. Sure. You got Stafford left, who's won a Super Bowl.
Yep.
And you got Hurts, who's been to a Super Bowl. And they're playing Daniels, who is the second overall pick, who's playing unbelievable football as a rookie. But they're all primo with the exception of Hurts. Doesn't that – we've got to be able to – there's not only one guy in college football, and you mentioned Cam Ward. Cam Ward last year, you said this, and your college football Nate's more plugged in 24 than he was in 23. Wouldn't have been drafted.
No.
So whether it's maybe you fall in love with the Jackson Dart, maybe it's certainly not Aller after that performance. I don't think there's any question he's not ready to come out, and he's not going to come out. Whether it's Shador, who a lot of people all along thought was going to be one of the top picks in this draft. There's got to be somebody that you can work with here, because until you get that right, Andrew, I feel like nothing else really matters. Like, if you trade down and you get an offensive tackle, okay, is that going to help you beat Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow twice a year?
No. Look, we're totally on the same page here. I can't see this as being the trade down into the 20s and take Alex Mack draft. I cannot. I can't see that. By the way, that was a great pick, Alex Mack. Borderline Hall of Famer.
For sure.
You got to find your guy. I also asked, AB last week, are you of the mind that if you think the quarterback, whomever this guy is, insert name here, is the guy, that it doesn't matter where you take him, even if you're picking 2, you just hand him the card. I go back to the Giants, and everyone rips Dave Gettleman for taking Daniel Jones, and then waiting until 17 to take Dexter Lawrence, who turned out to be the far better pick. But I'm totally with Dave Gettleman. It's like, if you think the quarterback is the guy, now he was wrong, but he did win a road playoff game and get a second contract, then you take him. It doesn't matter if it's 6, right? You just hand in the card, because no one remembers where he was taken. You know what? You could have gotten better value if you tried to trade down. You could have gotten down. You could have gotten him at 10. You could have moved down, picked up a third-round pick, and gotten him at 11. No one remembers that. Just take the guy and get it right. You just have to have the conviction that he is truly the guy.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's an inexact science.
That's the thing.
Because there is no sure thing. Andrew Luck was probably the surest thing that we've had in the last 15 years at the quarterback position. Trevor Lawrence was probably second. Yeah. And because of a bunch of different circumstances, it hasn't got – he obviously got the second contract. I love him. He still looks like a franchise quarterback to me, but they have not elicited the immediate results because of circumstances, I think, largely out of his power. But that's the thing with it is you just want – to get at bats at that position until you hit one out of the park. Whether it's 2, whatever. I'd love to see 2 of them drafted. Swing and swing and swing until you get one. And I think that's what
Washington did.
Yes, and you know what that does, fellas? Whether it's this list of veteran free agent notables, Darnold Wilson, Daniel Jones, Mac Jones, Justin Fields, Marcus Mariota, Andy Dalton, Jacoby Brissett, there's varying levels of hope that is in all of those guys' names, high and some of it very, very low. But a rookie quarterback invigorates everything. It gives everybody a sense of hope. We need to get hope back at the position, guys. You got to get hope back that there's some answer in that room long term.
Go back. A lot of circumstances dictate so much, right? Like, if quarterback A went here instead of there, he would have had a better career. We talk about that all the time. I think this is a good setup You have Jerry Jeudy, you have David Njoku, you have a guy that is a very good play caller, assuming Kevin takes back play calling, although I realize that's very much in flux here. I remember years ago, and you want to replay the 99 draft, obviously the Browns took Tim Couch. I went to Syracuse, I want to say, with Donovan McNabb. We overlapped a year or two. We knew each other, and then we, years later, worked together at NFL Network.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked Donovan one day, I said, I wanted, obviously, you to be the choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wanted you to be number one overall. I said, do you think you would have had the same career if you went to Cleveland? He goes, oh, absolutely not.
Mm-mm.
Never would have happened. He goes, it was an expansion team, an expansion O-line. He's like, no. I went to Philly. I got Andy Reid. I got to sit a little bit. No, absolutely not. Circumstances matter, okay?
Of course.
I think, Nathan, to your point, that even with the record is what it is, but I think there's the right elements here where, yes, Kevin can develop and will develop that guy. Just got to figure out who that guy is.
And Andrew, to that point from Tom Pelissero 4 minutes ago, the Browns are promoting Tommy Rees to offensive coordinator per sources. Former Notre Dame star quarterback, Rees has become one of the NFL's youngest coordinators at age 32. Previously had stints at Notre Dame and Alabama as OC QB coach before joining Kevin Stefanski's staff last year. And so who better to work with a kid coming right out of college than Tommy Rees?
He worked wonders with Jalen Milroe 2 years ago at Alabama. Milroe was benched early in that season last year at Alabama, and then got the job back and played them all the way to a national semifinal. They won the SEC. He was a borderline Heisman candidate, and so he got a lot out of Jalen Milroe, and you saw Milroe took a step back this year at Alabama without Tommy there. So that is a very bright sign, and I agree with you completely that is a mentor-type situation potentially for Tommy, Andrew.
Nathan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is I wanted him or Kubiak. I think Tommy Rees, if you're starting with a young quarterback, feels like the perfect guy to do that, to steward that, played the position himself. You talked about what he did with Milroe, was just recently in that world in the SEC, in college football, understands a lot of those concepts. I think I'm very excited about this. I know that there was a lot of interest in him around the league. I know Vrabes was interested in bringing him to New England. I know that North Carolina, he was the next guy up if Bill Belichick didn't take that job.
For the HC.
For the head coaching job at the University of North Carolina. So this is well-regarded, rising star, and feels like this is, kind of to tie a bow on this, a sign, at least I hope, that we will be seeing a quarterback early in this draft for the Cleveland Browns, because who better than the combination of Stefanski and Rees to do that? Was the point I was making earlier.
Yeah.
And then now it is, in 4 minutes, Tom Pelissero is reporting that is the direction the Cleveland Browns are going to go. So, yeah, that's my reaction to
plays?
it.
That's my question.
I think it would be Kevin.
I like it as well, by the way. Yeah.
I think it would be Kevin calling plays.
I think Tommy could do it.
He
if
certainly could
to.
do it.
He would
And
certainly have the ability to.
He could.
And the one thing that begs the question about it is, likely had he gone to, let's say, New England, for example, it would have been as a play caller. So to compete with potentially that kind of an offer, perhaps it is that he will be the play caller for this young quarterback. Now, I think now we're getting into like all kinds of what ifs. But for example, let's say you draft a quarterback high, you have the conversation with Kirk Cousins, he knows right away. My guess is if Kirk Cousins is your quarterback, you want Kevin Stefanski calling the plays. They've done it together before.
Sure.
But if you are drafting somebody at 2 and you're saying, you know what, away we go, and quite frankly, if you draft them at number 2, I think that they do start right out of the gate. Tommy can call the plays. That's something to get figured out, but I think we've got the people to cultivate and nurture a young quarterback in place now with this report.
The other thing you get out of Tommy Rees is you're going to have, just really quick, I know on some draft boards the number 2 quarterback is or the number 1 quarterback is Shedeur Sanders. Number 2 is Cam Ward. Number 3 is Quinn Ewers. Jackson Dart's on a lot of these lists too. His top 5. at Alabama, they played Texas and they played Ole Miss a year ago. He would have a very good handle, at least. He would have certainly what Alabama thought of those two quarterbacks from a year ago. And so there's some intellectual property there that Tommy Rees has that could be very beneficial, Andrew.
Yeah, no, totally. And let's not forget Glenn Cook is a Miami guy as well. So
yeah.
there's certainly knowledge here as they get ready and build their way to the draft. I like it. I'm with you, Nathan. It was him or Clint Kubiak. Remember the Saints had 90 points on the board, I think, the first couple of weeks, and obviously things fell apart for them. Either one of those would have worked for me. Some of the other names that were kicked around, I was less enthusiastic about. One of these two names makes sense for me, and I also think, and I think maybe one of the untold stories or unpacked mysteries, let's get Shatner in here, during the season was why exactly Kevin decided to give up play calling.
Yeah.
I think it's time to take it back. This is just me. Not only why he did it, but when he did it. It just didn't make sense to me. Although I do totally understand his desire to be in the other rooms, his desire to be more of a head coach and not just a guy on the play caller and focused on one thing and, manage everything, right? Things were getting away. He needed to manage everything. I totally get that. Still, it was always curious to me, the timing. I would love to see him take it back, and that's not a knock on Tommy Rees. I just think he's proven that he can be that guy and should be that guy.
Well, certainly one question now as we look ahead to next year has been answered, and what does that mean going forward at that position will be fascinating. Buddy, good catching up with you. As always, thank you for your time.
Hey, as always, guys, I am, as Nathan knows, because I annoy the heck out of him with texts during the show.
I love it.
I'm listening from afar. Yes. No, so you get a minute. Sometimes it's got to be annoying.
I'm a great multitasker.
You get a minute. No, you
medium.
are. Sometimes I'll
pretty good
text,
multitasker.
I'll look at the screen.
2 tasks,
I'm
3.
watching on YouTube.
Yeah, I lose you at 3. 3,
Yeah.
I lose him, yeah.
And I see your eyes go down to the iPad. I'm like, yeah, shit.
It's
Like,
awesome.
I just totally broke his train of thought. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to screw you.
All right, buddy. Good talking to you.
You got it, guys.
All right, coming up next, our Brown staff writer Kelsey Russo will join us in studio for some of her end-of-the-season awards. We will get to that coming up next. You're listening to Cleveland Browns Daily Year in Review Show on 850 ESPN Cleveland. Howard Hanna, the official real estate provider of your Cleveland Browns, our exclusive buyer agent there to help you navigate the field, save time and money, and score that winning touchdown, a new home. Win big with the leader in real estate. Visit howardhanna.com/go Browns today for more. Joining us here in studio, Browns staff writer Kelsey Russo. We'll do some end of the season awards, Kels, but first, all indications and reporting that a first big win of the offseason has happened here. Tommy Rees will come on as offensive coordinator, according to the reports and all the indications. Keeping Tommy here, who is someone who we know was very much coveted around the football world, a nice offseason win for this front office and for Kevin Stefanski.
Absolutely. And, he had so much experience this past season working with the tight ends, working in the pass game. He has experience as an offensive coordinator at Notre Dame and Alabama, so it's a really good position for him to move higher into an NFL organization and bring his experience to the table. So I think it's a really good win. Like you said, it's somebody that Kevin knows really well from his experience. So it's a good all-around win. It'll be exciting to see what he can do.
Oh, wait, look at your graph.
Oh,
You're grabbing
hey.
the picture and
How about
everything.
that?
Look at that.
Well, how about it? Yeah, look, it also means that when, lots of times people aren't paying a great deal of attention to who's hired as a tight ends coach, that's a heck of a get a year ago to get him into your building, and then now a year later, he's your offensive coordinator. And we've been talking about, you pick second. Who better to work with a young quarterback than a guy who was just working with college quarterbacks 2 years ago?
There's going to be a relatability home run here.
Yes.
With him and a young quarterback, and we saw that from his time both at Notre Dame and at Alabama previous to coming here. All right, time to hand out some end-of-season awards. We're looking for winners in the following categories. Kels, we'll start with you. Your Browns' most improved player in 2024.
Okay, so I picked Cedric Tillman. I thought, in his second season, obviously he had the injury at the end of the season, but he really stepped into a more increased role within that receiving core. And so I really liked what he was able to do, the connections that he built, and I just thought he really showcased who he could be as a young receiver in this core.
And just robbed at the end of that.
He missed the last 6 games, and we saw it unfortunately, for 3 games. It was tough.
Yeah.
Very tough.
How about you, Dr. Z, most improved?
Oh, Isaiah McGuire, easily. Isaiah McGuire leads the team, tied with Myles Garrett, 3 forced fumbles on the season, 2.5 sacks once he became a full-time starter, 8 tackles for a loss. That was tied for 3rd on the team, behind only Myles and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, tied with Devin Bush, who I thought had a very good season as well. When you think about this group, he was coming into this one as the 5th defensive end, honestly, because you think about Myles, you had Za'Darius, you had Obo, you had Alex Wright. He really didn't play much as a rookie, and so for him to be able to come in and then become really starting quality, and when I say it, just you took on the Browns defense at Pro Football Focus, pretty sure he was 2nd on the team when it was all said and done. I'm pulling that up right now, but I thought just a tremendous progression in year 2, 4th-round pick. He was the 2nd highest graded defender on the team behind Myles Garrett. Those are the kind of picks you need when we've got some of the issues that we've got in terms of salary, and I know that they're all negotiable and navigable, and we will be fine there. But when you have a 4th rounder on 2 more years on a rookie deal that you can say, you know what, next year I'd have no problem saying he's starting at the end opposite Myles Garrett. That's a great thing for the Browns.
All right, Dr. Z, I'm going to stay to you with you on this one. Your rookie of the year in 2024 for the Cleveland Browns.
We didn't get to see as much of him as I would like, but I'm going to say Mike Hall. I think Mike Hall has the potential to be an absolute force, and he was a guy that in his limited time hit the quarterback a lot. Got back there, he had 6 quarterback hits in 8 games, had a sack, 3 tackles for a loss, penetrator, aggressive upfield. We just didn't get to see enough of him. Didn't even play half of the season.
Yeah, Kels.
All right, I picked Winston Reed for this one because I thought it was he played 373 snaps on special teams, 144 defensive snaps, and 8 offensive snaps, kind of more so like in that full back row. He was all over the field, and we saw his impact. He had one fumble recovery, a half a sack, 23 tackles, a quarterback hit, a tackle for a loss. He had 2 passes defense, so he really had an impact even in his time on the field, wherever it was, and I thought he really made a name for himself being able to be so versatile. And So that's why I picked him. I thought, he just had a really good first season, not knowing what his role was going to
Sure.
look like. And so being able to find that way to impact the game in all different areas really sets him up, for the future in the sense of he can be used in different areas on the field.
Yeah, force that role. Let's stay with you, Kels, on this one. Team MVP not named Myles Garrett.
This was tough because obviously Miles is the
That's
the
one.
choice. But I picked Jerry Jeudy for this. You set a franchise record for receptions in a season with 90 receptions. You finished 5th in team history with 1,200 receiving yards, and he was named his first career Pro Bowl, and he was a starter. And you think about the first half of his season, was it as consistent as people would have liked to have seen? But as the season went on, I felt like he found his comfort level. He really found those connections and everything, and he really showcased who he could be as a receiver for this team. So that's why I picked him. I think he was, most valuable, especially in the pass game.
Well, showcased with Jameis, too. I mean, that's when it really flipped. Go
I mean,
ahead,
he didn't
Dustin.
have in his first 7 games with Deshaun, a quarterback, didn't have a single game of 75 yards. And then from that moment forward, he went 79, 73. His highest in the beginning, first 7 was 73, goes 79, 73, 142, 85, 235, 64, 108, 94. Just a completely different level of performance. And we talked about most catches in a single season, 5th most yards in a single season for the Cleveland Browns. Look, Denzel was great. Without Jerry Jeudy, there may have been no joy on offense this season. I
Yes.
mean,
Yeah.
none. That is the one thing that you can say, okay, made this trade, former first rounder, is who we thought he was. Now we have him signed actually at a great number relative to his production, and he's going to be here and be a big part of what we do going forward, and you've seen it. Without that, there wasn't going to be a whole lot to be excited about offensively, like just full stop, period. Quarterback room is probably going to be completely different. Nick Chubb gets hurt again. Jerome Ford showed some flashes, certainly. A couple of those long runs, 60-plus yarders. That's great to see. Chief was in and out of the lineup this year. Tillman misses the last 6 games. Without Jerry Jeudy, there really isn't a whole lot that you were excited about offensively. And defense is great, but the NFL is about teams that can score the football.
Yep.
And you do that on offense.
All right, buddy, staying with you, your play or moment of the year.
Just the Jim Donovan game, just that
whole game.
The whole game, the feeling I had, when I was just like, I remember I said on one of the calls, I'm telling you, like, we're just winning this game. There's just no possible other outcome. And then Hamilton drops the pick and then touchdown to Tillman, and just what that meant to, I think everybody there, how cathartic it was, what it meant to everybody, myself included, who loved Jim, and those who knew him and loved him, and those who didn't know him but also loved him because he was just such a part of their lives. And to have AB and Kevin drive out to the family home and present them with the game ball that day. I mean, the significance of what that meant and the reach that it had, so beyond the fact that we won a football game. It couldn't have happened. It didn't matter if that happens in Baltimore and we beat them. It's not the same. It was
it had to be here.
The timing. It had to be that game. It had to be that moment, and it was. And it was just, honestly, it was spiritual, magical, emotional, powerful, beyond what I understand about the everyday world.
Yep. Kels?
I was going to say that same game, not only for that aspect, but also then too, I was going to say Nick Chubb's return. I thought just the way that the crowd reacted as well, him scoring that touchdown, it just kind of, obviously I know he got hurt at the end of the season, but for him in that moment and for the fans to experience that moment with him scoring that touchdown, that I thought was a really key moment in the season of, again, just some joy and some hope of what this season could look like, or future for him as well, of okay, he's back, he's scoring a touchdown, etc. So that moment, this was hard to choose just one. I also picked the Steelers, the snow game. I mean,
So I think they're different. Like the Ravens game is this emotional behemoth in every possible way, every wide range of emotion. The Steelers game was just good fun.
It was just good
It
fun.
was just good fun for the folks who were down there in the snow globe game.
And you beat the Steelers.
It was those two, they were so different emotionally for various reasons and obvious reasons, but both I think were very, very special. I was so thrilled for the fans in that Pittsburgh one because that was just pure fun and pure joy is what that one was. Kelsa, we'll get you out of here on this one. What was your favorite story to work on this season?
So kind of going off of that, I would think, honestly, my Nick Chubb long-form feature that I got to do, that was a project that I had pitched during the summer and thought this could be a really cool opportunity for us to do. if he wanted to share his story, we could do that in a really unique format, working for the team, etc. So that was a labor of love. It took a lot of effort, but I talked to so many different people, went through a bunch of rounds of edits, and for Nick's openness to share what he went through in
that was a
that
great one.
in that story, thank you. But like in his recovery process, what Pat Rock shared, that their openness to really dive in with me to tell me what exactly he went through and happened meant a lot. And then it also felt like I could then tell his story to that full extent, and so. I hope he was really appreciative. He seemed like it so when we chatted about what I wanted to do, and he was very open to sharing that with me. So that was probably my favorite.
That was awesome.
Favorite and not the correct word, but I felt really, really honored to be able to write Jim's obituary, and like the labor of love I also put into that because of what he means to this organization, to everybody. It was incredibly tough to write, but it was also very honoring, I guess, for myself to be able to share that. And so I just wanted to do him, he means so much. So I wanted to do him justice. I wanted his story to live through. And so, like I said, favorite's not the correct word, but something that was really meaningful to me and hopefully to the organization.
And those are like back-to-back weeks, right?
Yes.
Because it was
same.
Cincinnati with Chubb and then...
Yeah.
Great work.
Thank you.
Not just today, but all season long, Kelsey.
Yeah, thank you.
Russo, thank you for joining us here in studio. You listen to the Cleveland Browns Daily Year in Review show on 850 ESPN Cleveland. All right, welcome back in. Cleveland Browns Daily, 850 ESPN Cleveland. When a medical mistake causes you injury, call the medical malpractice attorneys.
30 seconds left of music.
Kev, we're talking to you. Do you not have us?
Browns Daily, 850 ESPN Cleveland. When a medical mistake causes you injury, call the medical malpractice attorneys at 1-800-ELK Ohio. Elk & Elk's proud partner of your Cleveland Browns. As we continue our season review program, we now are joined on the Twisted Tea Hotline, brought to you by Twisted Tea Hard Iced Tea, official sponsor of your Cleveland Browns. Keep it Twisted Cleveland. It is sideline analyst, the great Gerard Cherry, joins us. And Gerard, we have some news today as well, in that all indications and being widely reported that Tommy Rees will be the new offensive coordinator here with the Cleveland Browns, previously on the staff as tight ends coach. Before that, offensive coordinator at Alabama and at Notre Dame. What are your thoughts on the move?
Well, first and foremost, that talks of symmetry, Bo, and that makes a lot of sense to me because when you think about what took place last offseason, what do? We revamped the entire offense. So having a guy who's been there, done that, Kevin doesn't have to worry about a learning curve of how does he adjust to my body language? Does he look at me sideways when I say something he's not accustomed to hearing? Those things go out the window, so the adjustment period and the acclimation process is very limited because of the fact of what? They spent time together. So that's a great hire in my mind. It also appears to me, and I'll just put it out there, he'll accept the idea of being a guy who's going to run the cards, make the cards, and allow Kevin to go back to what he does very well, which is call plays.
Yeah, and he's also, it feels to me like somebody very well positioned to work with a young quarterback. And I think that is obviously the goal for this team, is to get a solution at that all-important position, right, Gerard? And so you have a guy that was most recently an offensive coordinator at the University of Alabama under Nick Saban, worked with Jaden Milroe, was OC as well for Notre Dame, played quarterback at Notre Dame. He's only 32 years old, should be able to relate to these young kids and what they're going through. So it feels to me like there are benefits on many, many levels when it comes to the naming of Tommy Rees as the Browns offensive coordinator.
Exactly, and he's certainly in a space, too. If you have a veteran in place, he's at that age range where he'd fit in that gap, as well as that inexperienced rookie player that you could be potentially looking at as well. So, no, it makes complete sense to me to hire in-house and once again work with someone who's familiar with operations and how things go, and also what went wrong last season and how we can correct it.
Gerard, one of the things we're going to talk about here in our season review show, the brunt of the things we're going to talk about with you is this Cleveland Browns defense. A year ago, one of the best in the league. Statistically, obviously, fell off this year from what it was a year ago. But how much of that was the offensive fall off as well? And what did you make of what you saw from the Browns defensively in 2024 compared to what you saw in 2023? And how much are those two things married?
Oh, they're completely married. We talk about complimentary football all day, every day for a reason, because it matters. And if you're not playing complimentary football, and if you're in a situation where your offense has turned the football over ad nauseum, and we're at some point we were doing just that, guess what? That's going to put the defensive football unit on the football field. That's going to be time of possession. That's going to be opportunities to score, and that's going to hurt and impact the morale of the defense, especially when you're in situations where you're driving completely down the football field, and then the next thing you know, you turn the ball over. Those things factor into how guys go out there and do their job. But I will say this, early on, there were some struggles with the defense. It wasn't just on the offense. All three phases weren't playing complimentary football, and it showed its, and it reared its ugly head. But at some point, I feel maybe like 4 or 5 games into the season, you start seeing the defense trending towards getting back to what they were the previous season and playing at a high level to where you said, you know what, this defense right here can be a playoff caliber Super Bowl championship style defense.
Gerard, when you look at this defense, and you take the 2 years of Jim Schwartz, you know, they've gone 28 straight games now without allowing a 300-yard passer. Second place in that type of a streak is 13 games of the Eagles. They are number one in third down percentage over the last 2 years. They've allowed 556 first downs over the last 2 years. That's 70 fewer than second place, which is Kansas City. Total yards per game over the last 2 years, they are third in the NFL. So they have still been very productive, but at the same time, we said it was not necessarily to the level that you wanted. What really stood out to me, and I'm curious to get your take on how you actually changed this, if that's even possible. Where were the takeaways? Where were the takeaways this year? And you've got a very good secondary and a lot of investment in a secondary that had 4 interceptions on the season as a team. And by the way, JOK had one of those picks. Denzel had 2. There just weren't the plays that you expected to be made. Why didn't the Browns take the ball away more?
Well, one, we saw that there were ample opportunities, especially in the secondary. Think about the PBUs that could actually have been INTs, right? So that factors in, and we could never forget this, guys. I say this in jest, but it's absolutely the truth. You play DB for a reason. If Denzel Ward had hands, guess what he'd be playing right now? He'd be playing wide receiver, and he'd be pretty good at it as well. So Emerson, the same thing. So these guys had plenty of opportunity. Unfortunately, just could not come down with the football in the process. So I equate some of it to that. It's the simple fact that, hey, we just weren't getting the job done. And then when you look at overall, it's about emphasis, really. How much did we focus on the idea of taking away the football? How much of it
every day
was that practice? How much of that was drilled? And how much of that was a process of us just, as a coach, ad nauseum talking about taking away the football? But when you have a bunch of things going on the way in which we did, it's almost like, okay, there's a sinking ship. This hole is now open. Which one are we going to plug? We're going to plug that. We're going to plug that one. And then you forget about the little nuances and things of taking a ball over to create turnovers when it was obvious that we needed to create turnovers.
Yeah, it certainly was. And I think as we now are into off-season mode, Gerard, and you take a look at the defense specifically, which is what we're doing here, what things need to be sorted out this offseason? What is the checklist for Andrew Berry and talking to Jim Schwartz about the things that need to be amplified defensively? What are the most important things for you?
Well, a couple things you got going for you. You have, especially if JOK is returning and he's able to go out the gate, you have on all 3 levels of the defense a difference maker. Obviously, Miles is a difference maker. JOK was on his way to being a difference maker. And Denzel is a difference maker. So you have those guys who are absolute and pronounced in what they're able to do to just shut down an opponent. Then what you want to make sure that you have going on is just the overall collective attitude of the defense. And going into this season, I was like, okay, guys, remember what happened in Houston. Where's the hunger? Where's the desire? Because here's the thing I do know. The ability, the talent, that's not the issue. It's going to come down to your attitude, your demeanor, and this sense of where you're possessed with the idea of no one scoring on us. We're going to give you the business. If the offense is not taking care of their end of the bargain, we'll still show up and show out. That has to be the mentality moving forward. It really has to be one of ultra aggression because of the fact that on a lot of levels we didn't display that this year, and that's going to have to be a part of the process. So if anything, guys, I would say it's more a mental adjustment than the physical of what we have as far as what's on the roster.
When you look at this defense, obviously the headliners stood out. Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, they stood out a great deal, but some young players shined as well. Who are guys that you saw that you think, you know what, these guys have the potential to be a big part of the solution here going forward?
Yeah, there's a bunch of guys you can name: McGuire, Hall, Briggs, Reed, Alex Wright, Diabate, all those guys. And heck, I'm going to throw also Bush in the mix as well. I thought he did a good job when he got an opportunity to play, in which he was making plays. So you have a bunch of guys right there, and this is the part that's really impressive to me. All right, you know you're playing for nothing. You're getting beat. The offense is turning the football over, but are these guys laying on their swords? Are these guys quitting? Are these guys going out there still playing a ferocious, blaring football? They were competing. And you say, well, they're pros. They're supposed to do that. Normally in a situation like that, guys, I can attest to it because I've seen it. Some guys pack up their bags, count the practices and their checks, and don't give you no effort, but just enough to get by to say that they're doing their job, not putting in full-fledged effort like we saw. So there's certainly something to build with this defense, and what you have there, again, it's going to be about what we do out the gate, what we're doing in mini camp, what we're doing in training camp, what we're doing in preseason games to set ourselves up in a situation where we have a foundation in which to build upon and not come into the season struggling with our sea legs.
Gerard, what's it like been you the last couple of seasons on the sideline, a front row seat to what Myles Garrett does week in and week out?
Oh, it's a thing of beauty to watch one of the best in the business or ever to do what they do, and just what he brings to the table, because there's an element of great athletic ability being applied. There's an element of thought-provoking of how I'm going to set up a guy, how I'm going to beat a guy. And then from the X's and O's standpoint, guys, I want to say it was the Bengals. I watched them dedicate their whole play calling to Myles Garrett. It was phenomenal in that, okay, if we're going to go deep, we're going to double teams Myles. If we're going to go with a shorter route, we're going to single up with Myles. And one time they violated that principle, and guess what happened? Myles got the sack. So just watching someone that dominant that you dedicate your entire game plan to slowing him down, and that if you don't do that, it's going to blow up in your face, and to witness that, it's been incredible. But you see it week in and week out, which is another reason why Myles Garrett should be the defensive player of the year, because no one gets schemed like he gets schemed to get stopped.
He gets double team, triple team at the highest rate in the league, led the league in tackles for a loss, had the 14 sacks. Trey Hendrickson ultimately would go on to lead the league with 16 and a half sacks there. But yeah, he has been great. Now, one thing that at times has looked very good for the Cleveland Browns and at others certainly did not, special teams. And, you understand that side of the business very well. Bojorquez had a great year, but, Dustin Hopkins struggled. We gave up a kick return touchdown. We gave up a punt return touchdown. What did you see happening on there on that special teams unit under Bubba Ventrone in this season?
Well, you saw a mixed bag situation, because whenever you hear a touchdown in the conversation with special teams, Bubba will be the first to tell you failed. You never give up TDs in the special teams game. You just don't do that. Now, obviously, and you just don't do that. I don't care if it's a block punt. I don't care if it's a return. You just don't do, or a field goal. You just don't do that. So what I saw was in those situations where we had those returns, just simply, guys, do your proper execution from a lane coverage standpoint and get the job done. And when a tackle and opportunity presents itself, make the play. It was really that simple. Once again, beating ourselves and not doing what we were instructed and coached to do. So the issue is not being coached on what to do. The issue is executing and doing what you're taught to do. So that's what I saw really on special teams this year, of why it was not to the level that we expected it to be and why we had the big returns on a regular basis. And obviously that's not a good thing. We have to shore that up. And it's not like we don't have guys who are dedicated to the game of playing special teams at a high level. We have that, along with some starters.
All right, I'm pretty sure it was a year ago in the season review show that a meal you had at Mastro's, I believe,
yes,
in
that
Houston.
was next level.
That was,
Yes, sir.
that was his moment of the year.
That was your moment of the year last year. All right, buddy, what was your best meal on the road this season?
Best meal on the road this season. It won't be a steak joint this year, and don't get me wrong. Where we go, Jack Ruby's in Cincinnati. That was a fine meal. And Nate, dog, once again, dog, thank you for coming through and setting that all up and taking care of your boys.
Delightful.
But I'm gonna go with Gibby. I don't know where you're at, dog, but wherever the name of that diner was in Denver, where they were serving that breakfast burrito, that bad boy was fire. I went back 2 days in a row.
Ran it back.
Ran it back, yes, sir.
Oh, my gosh.
Walked from the hotel to that bad boy. That's how dedicated I was to it in probably 20-degree weather.
Oh, that's good. That's good. We'll track down the details on the breakfast burrito, my friend. Great job all season long, and thank you so much for taking the time with us today on the Year in Review show. Thanks, pal.
I appreciate it, guys. Take care.
All right, that's Browns sideline analyst Gerard Cherry joining on the Twisted Tea Hotline, brought to you by Twisted Tea Hard Iced Tea, official sponsor of your Cleveland Browns. Keep it twisted, Cleveland. Coming up next on this special season Year in Review show, we'll take a look at the jobs going forward for Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. You listen to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland. OBM, the provider of copiers and document services for your Cleveland Browns. They'll tackle any size office. The number is 216-485-2000 or visit ohiobusinessmachines.com. Time to have a little conversation, Z, about our general manager and our head coach. Obviously a very big offseason for both of them. Both of those guys hired with a lot of the building blocks in place. And the job was to help accentuate those building blocks. And then they made the decision at quarterback to go off of Baker and on to Deshaun. And we've been over that a million times. But now, at this point in their tenures, they have to find a way to rewrite this ship. And so that is the job heading into a critical offseason for this franchise.
It is the most critical for this regime, all of it. We finally have had some continuity, 5 seasons now. They signed extensions prior to last year.
Yep.
You go back and you mentioned kind of the domino that set a lot of the stuff in motion, and that was the realization that you have to compete with Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson every single year in your division, and Mahomes and Allen and all of that, and that they felt like they needed to take a huge swing at the quarterback position to get somebody that was a top 5, top 8 quarterback in the league that could compete with them. They did not feel like they had that in Baker Mayfield. They felt like they needed to go try to get that. And the only reason a quarterback that had been at that level early in their career is available is because there was some baggage that came along with it. And they took the swing. You understand the swing. It made total sense to take the swing. And there were many teams, obviously, that were into it. But it has not worked out the way that you thought it would. The way, quite frankly, from a football on-field level, nobody in the world thought that it was going to go to this level.
No.
And now you've got the injuries and the re-injury, and that's it. So you are faced now with the biggest and most important offseason, I think, yet, because you have an asset. The number one, you haven't had a first-round pick, period, in 3 seasons as a result of that big swing. But number 2, and more importantly, you're picking second in the NFL draft, and you do not hope to be picking second ever again, quite frankly. That you've got to get a quarterback solution, period. Until you have that, you have nothing. You have nothing. And would it be fun to be the Bucs or the Steelers and win 9-10 games every year and go to the playoffs?
Fun.
Yes, it is fun. It actually is quite a bit of fun.
Mm-hmm.
But is the goal just to be fun, or is the goal to win a Super Bowl? Because those teams neither of those teams is anywhere near winning a Super Bowl. And when you think about the Bucs and the Super Bowl run that they went on in the modern NFL is because they had to bring in Tom Brady.
There's no doubt, and there's a lot of teams like that. Seattle's like that, where there is a ceiling, and it's concrete.
Very.
And you're not going to be able to bust through it. So in order to if you really want to aspire to be Kansas City and Baltimore and Cincinnati and Buffalo and the teams that wake up every season and go, hey, let's go win the damn thing, then you got to have that position. This potentially is a career-defining offseason for Andrew Berry. He's the number 2 pick in the draft. He has a roster that there's going to be some complicated things that are going to have to take place, but there's a lot of talent on it. There is a lifeboat in the number 2 pick in the draft, and to our point that we've been making really off season long, whether it's at number 2 overall or with whatever the way you've said it is the perfect way to say it. Somehow this has to elicit the answer at quarterback.
Yeah.
It has to. Whether it's too directly or it turning into other things to get you there, it has to get you an answer at quarterback for the next 3 to 5 minimum and 5 to 10 hopefully.
Yeah, because until you have that, unfortunately in this league, you don't have anything. And listen, folks, if you do take that quarterback at 2, you've got to have some patience with it. Now, there are cases, the Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels certainly, where it right out of the gate was perfect. Drake May certainly didn't have a winning season, but you saw signs that it was going to be good and they need to upgrade the talent around him. But then there's Bryce Young, who struggled through his rookie season, was benched this year, and then came back. And now, if you're Carolina, I think you feel really good about where he is and what he has become, the way he finished the season on the road in Atlanta. That was a playoff game for the Atlanta Falcons.
Yes. Yeah.
And he beat them. I think he made 5 total touchdowns himself in that game. That's the whole thing. You're here. You have an opportunity to control your destiny in that regard. And I go back to, 16. The Browns traded out of that. They ended up getting Corey Coleman. The Browns, not that I was a pure Goff guy,
Yeah.
But the Browns probably would have been better off, based on what we saw, with Carson Wentz in that draft.
Well, before he got hurt the following year, he was the MVP,
MVP
of
of
the
the
league.
league.
Yeah. So something happened, but and I think until you have it, you just got to keep casting, man.
Yeah.
You have to. You got to figure that thing out. In terms of Coach Stefanski, this year made the decision to give up play calling. All signs pointing to Tommy Rees being the offensive coordinator next year here. That's a big retention. That is a big win to keep him. He was coveted around the league, so that's huge if all of the signs pointing in that direction. How does Kevin self-scout what happened this year, and how do you think, knowing him as well as you do, he gets back to being the coach offensively, something that fits his eye a little bit more? Because I don't know if he was ever comfortable in what we were doing offensively this year. Certainly
I
the
don't
results
think he
wasn't.
was. No, and the results certainly were not great. And he's been able to be pretty successful without an elite quarterback for his entire time here.
Yeah.
You know, he got, prior to this year in Tampa, got the best play of Baker Mayfield's career. And I would say from a touchdown-interception ratio, the best. He was 20-2 over that from week 7 on in that season. You know, he got certainly better play than they got out of Jacoby Brissett in New England. He got good play, the best play we've seen out of Joe Flacco since he's come back to the league, or since he was, with the Jets and since he's left Baltimore. So it's there. You just need to figure it out. Now, Tom Pelissero says the Browns are going back to Kevin Stefanski's roots offensively and promoting a bright young coach he thinks highly of. Next up, finding a quarterback. So it doesn't necessarily say Kevin's going to call plays, but certainly it feels like it's set up for him to do that as he goes back to his roots per se. I think who they bring in will be very interesting, and you'll go from there. I think you've got, looking at this offseason, and for him, number one, you need to have a good running back, and I'd love to see Nick Chubb back. We don't know necessarily what he's going to be, coming off of now another injury. Obviously, it's still really coming back from the first one. The running back class in this draft is loaded. You could get a superstar at 33.
Yep.
You can get probably a superstar in the third round. And you've got 3 third-round picks. So I think you're going to address that position. You got to get the quarterback. And then from that, you're filling in. To me, it's all about people who can score the football.
Yep.
That's just, to me, what it is all about. In this league, you've got to be able to score. And how do you score? Playmakers. Yes, you need an offensive line. And you saw last night, the Vikings O-line got dominated. But for the most season, they were pretty good. But you've got to be able to score. And so I'm all about quarterback and weapons. I like what we are on defense. Obviously, you want to keep adding to that. But, McGuire, Mike Hall, Joanne Briggs certainly showed that he can play in this league at the defensive tackle position. You're in a good spot there, but you got to keep adding. But really, it's identifying if Kevin Stefanski is going to be able to run this offense, he needs to have some guys that he can run it with. You need another receiver. You need to think about as a good tight end class, a young tight end, because you don't have a young ascending tight end behind David Njoku. You have a lot of needs. But the one thing to me is I feel like on the offensive line you can find Germain Ifedi stepped in and honestly played just fine.
Couldn't agree more.
Just fine.
He's fine. Yep, just fine. So this is obviously a huge offseason for everybody involved, a huge draft for everybody involved. ESPN NFL Draft and college football analyst Jordan Reed will join us on that coming up next. You'll listen to Cleveland Browns Daily Year in Review on 850 ESPN Cleveland. For nearly a century, the Rumpke family is operating one of the nation's largest waste and recycling companies, providing top-level services to residential and commercial customers. To learn how they can help you meet your sustainability goals, visit Rumpke.com to learn more. Time to head out on the Twisted Tea hotline, brought to you by Twisted Tea Hard Iced Tea, official sponsor of your Cleveland Browns. Keep it Twisted, Cleveland. It is ESPN NFL Draft and college football analyst Jordan Reed. He's a great friend of the program. Jordan, thank you so much for the time, my friend. It's been fun knowing you all these years and having you be a big part of ESPN's future. That's a good job out of you. Let's start with this draft. And one of the things that you start to hear already here early is, oh, this is a bad quarterback draft. What does that mean? And what do you make of the quarterbacks at the top of this draft or even into the middle of this draft?
Yeah, that seems to be the common theme with this year's draft class. First and foremost, thank you guys for having me on. It's always a pleasure being here. I always love joining you guys. But with this quarterback class, I think we were so spoiled with last year's class, with Caleb Williams and Drake May and Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix and Michael Penix and J.J. McCarthy. We had 6 go in the top 12 picks. So it's never going to be a great quarterback class whenever you're comparing it to that class. And this class is nothing like last year's class. And the 2 guys you hear about at the top are Shedeur Sanders of Colorado and then also Cam Ward of Miami. But outside of that, there really isn't a consensus quarterback 3 right now. So obviously this year's class isn't nearly as strong as last year's draft class, but there is still some good players at the top led by those 2.
Jordan, if you were going to slot into a combined draft class scenario, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, I'll even throw out the name that we've heard a little bit about, Jackson Dart, where would they be in last year's draft class?
That's a great question. I think both of them probably would be in that Penix and then also Bo Nix tier. I had both of those guys at the bottom of that class at 5 and 6 in the rankings last year. I think Cam Ward and then also Shedeur would definitely be in the mix for that. And then after that, Dart will obviously be in the tier below those guys. So they probably would be in the mix for that 5, 6, or 7th slot in last year's class.
All right, Jordan, in terms of you already have a mock draft out. Of course, you have us taking Shedeur Sanders number 2 overall. If the board does fall that way, what is it about Shedeur that you think would be a fit in a Kevin Stefanski offense?
Well, it's offense that's really predicated upon playing on time, being accurate, and then also ball placement as well. And those are really the traits when you're talking about building a scouting report for Shedeur Sanders. Those are things that his game is predicated upon. He loves playing on time. He has really good ball placement. He has really good accuracy, and then the poise and the toughness that he plays with. I think those are some of the traits that he really relies on in his game. Now, he does need to get the ball out quicker. I think that's something that he does need to get better at, and then stop taking so many egregious sacks. I think that's another area of where he has to improve upon. But if we're just talking about the quarterback that aligns the best with the Kevin Stefanski offense, it would be Shedeur Sanders.
When you think about, you mentioned he would be kind of in that Penix, Bo Nix. Listen, Penix certainly looked good at the end of last year.
Yeah.
And you think about from the other standpoint, Bo Nix led a Denver team that nobody thought was going to go to the playoffs. If you were at 2, do you feel like because of the importance of the position, you understand where the Cleveland Browns are? Is it a no-brainer for you that you would take, either Ward or Sanders?
Man, there's so many different layers to this discussion for the Browns. I could be here talking all day about
Go ahead.
Well, it really comes down
not past 3
just
o'clock,
how they
but
feel.
go ahead.
I think it really just depends on how they feel about both of these guys at the top. But what I keep coming back to is that I just feel like this regime has to win games next year. And we already heard Myles Garrett come out and basically say that, hey, man, I just want to compete next year. Show me that this team is trying to compete. And you don't want to do anything to fish your star player off. So I think they're in a situation of where they have to take a quarterback, in my opinion. Now, they don't need to force one just because you never want to take a guy just to take one. But I just think the circumstances surrounding this regime and where they are at the quarterback spot right now, and then just the variables with this class, I think they're in a situation of where they have to take a quarterback. Now, I don't think there's a quarterback that's worthy of the number 1 or number 2 overall pick, in my opinion, in this draft class, but that's just the circumstances that are surrounding the regime right now where they have to take a quarterback. There's more talented players at the top of this year's class, whether it's Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. We've seen both of those players have phenomenal years this year, but I just think the Browns are in a situation of where they have to figure out a way to address the quarterback spot.
Jordan, is there a guy beyond those first two that you like that's kind of in that next group that intrigues you at least? Maybe not so much where you think, oh, yeah, this guy's worthy of going one or two, but where you could see an NFL starting future in their future?
As far as just a quarterback or just
quarterbacks, non-Shedeur and Cam Ward.
I don't see anybody in this class, honestly. I wouldn't feel comfortable about taking any of the other guys at the top of this draft class. And you're going to hear plenty of names. We already talked about one with Jackson Dart. Jalen Milroe could be another that rises up the board. I just don't see him being a round one prospect right now. I don't have him graded anywhere near that territory. And that's why I said the Browns are in such a tricky situation of where it really is Shedeur or Cam at the top of the draft class, just because I don't see any other quarterback that's round one worthy right now.
Is there anybody, a Will Howard, a McCord, that would be, in the third round or so that you think could be like a Kirk Cousins or, somebody that was drafted in the middle rounds but ends up becoming, a decent starter down the road?
Yeah, I think Dart could be that guy, but I think once he gets to the Senior Bowl and he plays really well down there, I think his stock is probably going to rise to where he goes somewhere late second, early third, if I had to guess right now. So now you're looking at potentially somebody like Quinn Ewers at Texas, Dylan Gabriel of Oregon, Will Howard, as you mentioned, Riley Leonard of Notre Dame was probably a later round pick, and even Kyle McCord, who had a really good rebound year at Syracuse. I think those are your names that definitely could go in that mid to late round range. But if I had to bet on one that could end up being that Kirk Cousins type, Kyle McCord at Syracuse, I think he's one that could be worth a shot just because of what he showed during his rebound year at Syracuse. And I think he has some really good traits to potentially maybe be a spot starter. I think that's probably his ceiling.
What about Will Howard, who obviously people listening to this show in Ohio have seen the run that he's been on, potentially leading them to the national championship, which feels pretty likely. High completion percentage, good size. What about Will Howard? What do you sign to see him, or do you have a comp for him?
I don't have a comp for him that I really love right now, but I think he has a lot of the traits that you like at the position, as you mentioned, the size, 6'5", 240, he's mobile, has really good accuracy, he can throw the ball down the field. He's been really hot over the past few games in the college football playoff. He's had some really good moments that I thought he didn't show at Kansas State. I think he's developed much more as a passer in this Ohio State offense. I would say he's a third or fourth round guy right now, if I had to guess. Without him going through the pre-draft stuff right now, that's where I would feel comfortable taking Will Howard right now. But he definitely has some traits that I think could help him on the next level.
All right, Jordan, we'll get you out of here on this one, buddy, and we greatly appreciate your time. You got to put the vast Jordan Reed estate on one player in this draft being a dude. Who do you put it on?
Well, man, you guys have put me on the spot. I'm gonna go with my top player in the draft, and that's Travis Hunter of Colorado. We haven't seen anything like this, honestly, since Champ Bailey when he was coming out of Georgia in the late '90s. A two-way player like this, and Champ ended up playing on the defensive side full time. But just his ability to affect the offense and defense from both sides of the ball, he's just a player that if I had to stand on the table or pound the table for one player in this draft, it would be Travis Hunter, just how special he is on both sides of the ball.
Well, Jordan, we greatly appreciate your time, buddy. I'm sure we'll see you over at the Combine next month. Thank you so much for giving us a little bit of your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys, as always.
All right, there it is. ESPN's Jordan Reed, NFL Draft college football analyst, joining us on the Twisted Tea Hard Iced Tea Hotline, official sponsor of your Cleveland Browns. Keep it twisted, Cleveland. You listen to the Cleveland Browns Daily Year in Review show on 850 ESPN Cleveland. All right, for the first time ever, witness Inter Miami taking on 2023 MLS Cup champion Columbus Crew at Huntington Bank Field. It is April 19th. Secure your spot to see with the MLS's biggest stars. Visit huntingtonbankfield.com/crew versus Miami to get your tickets today. You know, we're wrapping up this season year in review show. We would be remiss to not spend at least a little bit of time here at the end on Jameis Winston and how thankful we were to have his joy for a small period of time there in the middle of the season. That was the elixir we needed on the field and off.
He guided you to those two wins that were, two of the more fun wins that we've had here in our time in with the Cleveland Browns over the Ravens and the Jim Donovan game, the magic there, the touchdown to Tillman in the snow, just the joy he had, just the fact, what a character he was.
Yeah.
Always very easy to talk to, generous with his time, had the gift of gab, no doubt. And, it was just, you saw all the talent. And without him, Jerry Jeudy doesn't happen. Without him, you don't get the hope in Cedric Tillman that you've gotten. So, huge in that regard.
Huge. And there you go. That's your Cleveland Browns Daily Year in Review show. The next level is next, right here on 850 ESPN Cleveland.